What is the most significant cause of divergence among Kurds of the region? How has the cross-border nature of the Arab Spring affected power dynamics and the positions of Kurds in the Middle East? What is the strategy of the United States with Kurdish areas in the post-ISIS period? I'm Nakhavali, and this is Middle East Analitika. Dr. Salih, thank you very much for joining the program.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
The Kurdish political landscape in the Middle East is characterized by a variety of parties, each with its own priorities, ideologies, and relationships. Could you please provide an overview of some significant Kurdish parties in the Middle East and their general relationships with each other?
Actually, the significance of those parties goes back to the mid-last century, 20th century, especially after the Second World War in eastern part of Kurdistan, in Mukrian, in Iran, where under Qazi Muhammad, the Democratic Party of Kurdistan came to exist, and they proclaimed the Republic of Kurdistan in Mohammad. And within the same year, in 1946, another party came to exist with the same party, KDP of Iraq, that is combining the three political parties at the time. And then after that, in all parts of Kurdistan, almost you see a KDP in Syria, KDP in Turkey, with the KDP continued in Iran. And this is the major political party, and the offshoot of KDP in Iraq within the intra-political Kurdish politics led to existence of the PUK, Patriotic Union of Kurdistan, under Jalal Talabani in 1975. And again, that party has got its own influence on other parties in different parts of Kurdistan. However, right now, in the wider Kurdistan, the main two parties who are influencing, other Kurds in other parts of Kurdistan rather than their parts are mainly KDP and Masoud Barzani in Kurdistan region, and PKK, in Turkey.
Right. The lack of cross-border representatives, common policies, and a joint military defense unit among Kurds in the Middle East can be attributed to a combination of factors, including both actions by central governments and inherent differences among Kurds themselves. In your opinion, what's the significant cause of divergence among Kurds of the region?
Unfortunately, Kurds being divided onto, at least after the First World War, three nation states, and prior to that, during the Ottoman Safavid in 1500, the eastern part of Kurdistan became to the side of the Safavid, and the rest of them continued under the Ottomans, made it difficult for the Kurds across the borders. At least if they were in one part, the task would have been even easier to deal with the regional governments and to reach somewhere. However, now when they struggle in any part of, Kurdistan, it became, like a factor with the hand of the, other, regional powers within, different parts of Kurdistan, to use them against the others. However, since the KRG came to exist, especially in 2008 onwards, at least towards Turkey, they have adopted the KRG, moderate, politics, pacifying the danger or the worries that Turkey they had. However, as for Iran, Iran had relatively a better policy through Qarargah Ramazan to support the different factions among the Kurds against the former Iraqi regime and the Saddam Hussein. So Iran has got, better tie to the political parties in Kurdistan. However, since 2008 at least, KDP has got a strong tie to Turkey. This is, say, those two main parties, especially when we talk about, say, Slemani and Kurdistan region, say, people think they are PUK closer to Iran than, say, KDP, which is, say, the major party in Kurdistan region. And as I earlier said, those two parties has got their own influence on other political parties across the borders. This led to a kind of like a conflict of interest in the wider region of the Middle East, as well as for the Kurds within different parts of Kurdistan.
Right. Now let's talk about the Arab Spring. One of the notable effects of the Arab Spring was the redefinition of political landscape in the Middle East region. Protests and demonstration became powerful tools for expressing public anger and challenging authorities. How, in your opinion, has the cross-border nature of the Arab Spring affected the dynamics and the position of power centers in relation to disadvantaged groups like Kurds of the region?
You know, Arab Spring actually affected the Kurds, especially when we talk about the Kurds in Kurdistan region. Precisely in February, and exactly on February 17th, 2011, under the influence of the Arab Spring, there was a popular uprising in Kurdistan, mainly based in Suleymaniya region, Suleymaniya, Halabja, Germian, and those regions mainly under the control of, say, PUK, which we call it in Kurdish the Green Zone. The demand, mainly the culmination of the demand for services and better ruling was there, but the Arab Spring influenced the Kurds. And that came after actually, the influence of a group of, political opposition, namely after the existing, of Goran change movement, like merging out of PUK and the second man of the party, Mustafa, the late Mustafa, and the support with some other opposition party. However, that led to a kind of reconciliation between those opposition parties and the leading parties, and resulting to the, coalition government in 2013, where they came to convince that we are different than any Arab, country, that they have the spring. We should not, jeopardize the position of the region. Rather, we should participate in the government and try to reform within the government, which they failed again. And this was the obvious influence. However, in other parts of Kurdistan, let's say mainly the effect came in Rojava, in Syria. Up till this moment, they continue their demand for, a kind of autonomous rights within Syria.
Right. We remember that the consequence of Arab Spring was also creation of some extremist groups like ISIS in the region. In the same time, the rise of ISIS brought international attention to the Kurdish fight against them. Kurdish forces such as Kurdish Peshmerga in Iraq and the People's Protection Units in Syria played a significant role in combating ISIS. In your opinion, what opportunities and challenges did the emergence of ISIS present for Kurdish political actors in the region?
You're right, absolutely. There was an opportunity and lots of challenges where the Peshmerga across Kurdistan were fighting ISIS, in the frontiers more than 1,000 kilometers. However, the opportunity was that, brought a lot of attention to the Kurds and to the Peshmerga fighting ISIS on behalf of the world in that region. And that actually, led to especially when the political differences happened between Iraqi central government and the region, that escalated and ended up to the 2017 referendum. And the Kurds possibly the leadership of the Kurds in that part of Kurdistan at least were expecting say, a kind of a special treatment by the international community, which they did not find. Of course, the power vacuum in different parts of, Iraq and in Syria, precisely, led to the growth of ISIS and similar terrorist groups, where the Kurds proved to the world, they are the safest, region within those two countries to defend and lead to the demise of ISIS. And the challenges were quite strong and so dangerous for the, entire region in Iraq and for the, semi-autonomy or, ruling in Syria. And the opportunity was there, but politically they did not gain from it, especially in 2019, where, Donald Trump reacted to any political right to the Kurds in Syria. He treated them as if they were mercenaries. Was telling them they were getting, money and fought for that. And what else do they need from us? So this was quite disappointing for the Kurds. And actually, the Kurds, they have got a kind of experience. And this happened to, the late Mustafa Barzani in 1975, when, the settlement came between Shah and Saddam, and then, America supported that agreement of Algiers in 1975, and then hang up the line on Barzani, told them, we are not charity. Unfortunately, this is an experience that the Kurds always and ongoing they go through, and now they feel they've been left behind in a similar situation.
Right. Since you mentioned United States of America, let me ask you this, because we know that U.S. has played an important role in assisting Kurdish forces in Syria and in Iraq in fighting against the Islamic states. However, when Trump came to power, he decided to withdraw his forces from the region. So what is the strategy of United States regarding Kurds in the post-ISIS period, if they have any? And what consequences it will bring for Kurds of the region?
I think if we go back to 1991 uprising, and then the resolution, the Security Council Resolution 688, that led to the no-fly zone in Iraq, in Kurdistan, Iraq. And even at that moment, that was purely a humanitarian protection for the Kurds, for the genocide that they suffered in late 1980s under Saddam. Until this moment, they have no, they never told the Kurds actually that we guarantee for you a kind of political, solution. However, as a de facto, at least in those two parts of Kurdistan, the American, they benefited a lot from the existence of the Kurds, at least when they deal with the Iraqi government and the influence of Iran. They don't want to lose Kurdistan as a buffer zone between them and Iran. And in a similar scenario, they hope that the situation in Syria will continue in that way. But the pressure of Turkey in that part of Kurdistan is not easy to deal with it in a similar way that happened in Kurdistan region, where Iran was happy at least to use Kurdistan region as a buffer zone between Iran and the former Iraqi regime that led consequently to the regime change 2003. And that would have been a good scenario if Turkey was in line with them. However, that's the plan of Turkey, according to my understanding, came to end in collaboration with America and that kind of plan when the peace process between them and Turkey and PKK came to end in 2015. And that then now Turkey has got a kind of hostile policy towards that part of Kurdistan. And the American, they have no a kind of challenging policy towards the Turks in a similar way that they had towards the Iraqi regime, post 1991 up till 2003.
Right. Since you mentioned Turkey, let me ask you about the SDF, Syrian Democratic Forces, which was backed by the United States, and they successfully recaptured the last piece of ISIS-held territory in March 2019. However, since then, there were many unresolved issues in this area. We know that Turkey has many concerns about the STF. So first of all, and also we know that there were many clashes between Turkish authorities and Kurdish actors in this region. So in your opinion, why Turkey is so concerned about STF? And in light of these conflicts and clashes between Turkey and northeastern part of Syria, how this region will develop in the future?
I think the obvious reason for Turkey to be, say, worry about that part of Kurdistan and SDF or PYD, actually, it is to them, they are affiliated to PKK. And as I told you in the previous question, that when the peace process came to in 2015, Turkey became more worried, where especially found regionally Iran and internationally Russia were supporting, say, PKK, and possibly the fight would have gone into Turkey. Therefore, they, according to my understanding, they had a kind of deal to stop that merging, say, fighting in a similar way into Syria, into Turkey. And then and now, say, the plan is that the Assad regime will stay in power, and Iran is happy, Russians are happy. On the other hand, they support Turkey for limiting, say, the capability of the Kurds in Syria, which to them another version of PKK. And unfortunately, the Kurds in Syria, those who are in power, as you know, there are two groups, two major groups, political parties. One of them called like in Kurdish they call it Analitika, that like Kurdish Congress. For the group of the party, they say consist of 15 parties now. They are mainly close to KDP, and Turkey, they had no problem to deal with those. However, the other group, which backed, say, by PKK, say they don't give that, say, space to that, say, peaceful political parties, where mainly they are anti, say, those Kurdish in Syria, Kurdish political parties in Syria, and anti-KDP, KRG, which they consider them as close to Turkey. And then, therefore, any growth in that part of Kurdistan considered by Turkey as like another wing of PKK, which they are hostile to extremely to them, and they don't want to see them growing. Which, for me, say the only solution remains for the Kurds in that part of Kurdistan, Syria, it's to speak to the Syrian government, whoever in power. That's the only solution currently for them, because they have on the ground the de facto power, and say the Syrian regime won't be as strong as say pre-2011. So they should negotiate and to get a solution, especially they demand, say, an internal solution, which is in the best case like a federation for Syria and autonomous for the Kurds in Syria.
Right. Let's now talk about another superpower, Russia. How is the relation of Russia with Kurds of the region? And in light of the Russian and Ukrainian war, what cards do Russians have to use as a leverage on the United States in this region?
Unfortunately, the Kurds, they don't have, again, similar way with Americans. Though American, they help them. They have another, at least, chapter with the Kurds since 1991, and say even from the regime change of 2003 onward. And especially, as we highlighted earlier, in fighting ISIS. However, for the experience of the Kurds with Russia and previously with Soviet Union goes back to 1946-47 after the Second World War, when initially Soviet Union supported the Kurds in eastern part of Kurdistan in Iran, supported Qazi Muhammad to proclaim a nation state, and then later on when they had their deal with Shah, they disappointed them. This is where, say, the Kurds look at Russian, say, generally. However, now in Kurdistan region, there is a kind of semi-state. They don't deal from those kind of perspective only. They deal with Russia as a superpower, However, mainly now they know the major player still in the Middle East are the American.
Right. You mentioned Iran. So let's talk about the Kurds in Iran. The relation between Iranian government and Kurdish group has been complex, involving tensions and occasional clashes. We know that IRGC is bombing even Kurdish region of Iraq in some cases, accusing them for provoking protests within Iran. We remember the last protest in Iran called Women Life Freedom has witnessed the same accusation from Iranian government. So, in your opinion, what's the position of Kurds in Iran today?
I think, Iran, when, say, the popular uprising happened by, September 2022, where started, though the spark of that uprising came by killing Gina Amini in Tehran, which was a Kurdish lady. However, it was like a popular uprising or demand by the many women in the wider Iran, different parts of Iran, by different ethnic groups. However, Iran became hostile against those Kurdish parties where they base in Kurdistan region and pressured, the leading parties in Kurdistan region to stop those parties where obviously they never interfered, into Iranian affairs through KRG, never. And possibly without KRG being there in power, those, Kurdish political party would have been even more hostile and taken any, opportunity against Iran. However, there are what I see mere accusation by Iran, at least to tell the people in Iran, so we know where is the source of these instability in Iran, and is being exported through the KRG. However, Iran realizes that in a similar way that KRG is a buffer zone between, different countries and Iran, Iran realizes that Kurdistan is as good as for the American. And they are not certain about the future of the politics in Iraq, even in Baghdad, where it goes. In the case going to the side of, American, where, other powers going to merge and the Iranian going to have not upper hand in Baghdad, they are going to support the KRG. Iran as well, they want to keep KRG, however, they want it to be like a safe zone or better buffer zone between Iran and elsewhere. Therefore, Iran is not pushing to the extreme end towards the KRG. However, through the Iraqi government, they try to have a deal to stop those Kurdish political party or to remove them in a similar way that they had towards the Mujahideen Khalq previously.
Right. Okay, as a last question, I have to ask you that you mentioned earlier the referendum for independence in Iraq in 2017, and we remember what happened and how the regional and international actors reacted to this referendum with sanctions, blockade, and even invasion. So, in your opinion, is there any chance that Kurds will have their own independent state one day?
Just to be precise and to come from the end of your question, of course, any nation have got a chance. If you go back to, say, pre-2000, pre-First World War, okay, if you ask any nation within the Middle East, would you see yourself as a nation? If you ask the Lebanese, the Syrian, the Iraqis, they never could have thought about that. However, when the opportunity came, say, they found themselves. Actually, even the Arabs, and say they found themselves within different countries. And then it is the international will and the superpowers made and fragmented the Kurds. When the interests of those powers come to the right moment, of course, they have the chance. And the Kurds, they need to be realistic and realistically to, implement their, policies, whatever is possible, as we say in Arabic. Politics is the art of possible. Whatever is possible, you should, this is your margin. This is how you should play. And this is your card. You can use it wisely. For now, it is what is possible. It's within different parts of Kurdistan to have a similar autonomous rule, rule for the Kurds in Iran, in Syria, even in Turkey. And this is what they demand, actually. In all parts of Kurdistan, they demand a kind of autonomous for them. And what is wrong about that? Unfortunately, those countries are hostile to the idea of federation, as if this leads to separation. No, if they are wise enough, that leads to the unity. That leads to the unity. In a similar way that we come back to the idea of referendum. And the major factor that led to them, failure of the referendum was that, if we make an analogy to the referendum that happens to the Scots in 2014 here in Britain, the Scots, they sought the agreement of London, and then they had the right to call for the referendum, and the referendum would have been legitimate if they gone by majority to secede from the UK. However, we did not have that from Baghdad. And of course, the Kurds had their own rationale for that, because the Iraqi government disappointed them, and then they disregarded more than 50 articles in the Iraqi constitution in relation to the rights of the Kurds in that region. And they made them react. They left them with no option but the referendum. And that referendum was legitimate, and it is still a good card in the hand of the Kurds. But the opportunity comes, whenever it is possible. However, this can be a good card in the hand of the Kurds for the negotiation with the central government of Baghdad in Iraq. And that could have been a good model for the rest of the countries where they have the Kurds, to give them self-autonomous and to tie them up with the central government, make them loyal citizens with no feeling that they are being looked down or as second citizens as they feel. However, when it comes to the moment like Iraq, and they have no problem within the state, they are quite loyal citizens. Imagine in diaspora, why the Kurds are quite loyal to any country that they live in. Why they should have not been loyal to Iran, Iraq, Turkey, as long as they feel they have the right that they demand for. And their demand is legitimate, and it is possible to be fulfilled.
Dr. Salih, thank you very much for the insights, and it was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for watching and listening to us. Please don't forget to subscribe.